On April 13, 1878, a fire destroyed 15 acres of downtown Clarksville, wiping out businesses and homes. We were able to catch up with Randy Rubel, a 32-year veteran of the Clarksville Fire Department and a local historian, to ask him more about the fire of 1878. All right, thank you, Randy Rubel, for joining us today. We are talking about the fire of 1878, and come April 13th, we're coming up on the 144th anniversary of that devastating fire. So please tell us what happened, what's that situation, what happened to cause such a big, devastating fire in Clarksville?
I guess you might say the history and what happened was that after the Civil War, you had the period of Reconstruction where you had the federal soldiers, especially the colored troops, were placed in some of the southern towns, and they were placed in Clarksville as well.
Yes.
And then around 1875, I believe it was, or 1870, that the United States government started releasing them wherever they were at. So there were a lot of people in Clarksville, Tennessee that had prior military service and was released from the military, and they said, well, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? And so you're in a southern town. But from the account that I have read, but from the newspapers, but also from the history, there's two conflicting stories. It stated in one that a group had began fighting with a young Clarksville youth. Don't know about that. But I also read an account where this one particular black man had tried to rob I believe he was a dentist, and had a youth with him. And that might have been what they were referring to. And apparently there was a fight ensued. I don't know if he was trying to rob him or what, because you never really know the truth from the newspapers. You might have 6 different accounts and have 6 different answers or perspectives. But so apparently a sheriff's deputy was called and tried to stop this black man. And it's really interesting reading the newspaper accounts, because they talk about, in one story, about how a rock was thrown, and in another story you're reading where a gun was pulled and then a shot rang out. And in the newspaper accounts, again, you don't know who fired that shot, but the black person was shot. Yes. And his body was put on a wagon and taken down to the city jail. And then once inside the jail, apparently it said in the newspaper account that he had died. And there was a gathering down on Franklin Street, and then on First Street, more blacks had gathered and wanted to get this man released to them. And the sheriff himself was not going to release his deputy to this crowd or release the body to the crowd around maybe 10 o'clock at night. But someone broke into a store there on Franklin Street called King Cannon's Tin and Queensware store. And they broke into the store, and I don't know for what reason, but in the newspaper article, it stated that a fire was started in the back of the store. And so the fire spread so rapidly because in 1878, there were no fire stops in between the buildings. So apparently there was a telegraph message to Nashville, Tennessee, trying to get the fire department to come to help them. So they actually got a train with some cars on the back. They had an engine, a pumper, and they had firemen, and they had hose, and they set out to Clarksville to get down there to the 10th Street and Commerce right there.
Yes.
But by that time, the fire had already spread all the way over, I guess, to 3rd and Main Street.
Wow.
And the wind, it stated in the newspaper accounts how the wind had just taken all the flames, and before, you know, they could even, they couldn't stop it for number one, because the fire was so intense. And two is because it destroyed the only two volunteer fire stations in
About to
Clarksville.
ask. So, sadly, our local fire department wasn't up to that big task.
It was all destroyed. The fire was so intense, you could only get to a certain place, and then you had to stop. At that particular time, people were asking for townspeople to please come in and help remove some of the items from some of the stores, especially. The most important thing was the courthouse. They wanted to save records. They wanted to save any legal documents that they could. So it was an interesting story about how they brought wagons, carts, anything to haul off some of these records.
Now, you know, because it seems like was there a racial undertone? Was there not a racial undertone? And then once all the smoke finally settled and everything calmed down, what was the after effects of this fire?
Well, that's an interesting item to talk about, because yes, there was racial tensions. Apparently, if the story is true that these were, you might say, ex-colored troops that are put out in southern towns, and then you have a lot of bad feeling between the townspeople and those people that are in there already.
It's more for Union than Confederate kind of animosity there. Gotcha.
And I would venture to say that prior to that, as well as you know from doing your research, that there had been a illegal hanging and of a black man who was accused of possibly sexual assault on a 14-year-old child, and
he got no justice. One of the things about the fire of 1878 is we have here in our quiet city room in our public library, we have a gigantic, wonderful map from the Beers Company that had done it a year before the fire. And so it's on our wall over here. And when you look at the streets, the buildings and things like that, they're numbered. Some of them are numbered, and you can find Kincannon's shop, which is pretty much in the dead center of Franklin. But it also looks, just when you're looking at the map, the devastation that fire caused pretty much had to make Clarksville new again. And there are several articles that I've read that reference it as a phoenix rising.
Yes. One of the interesting, if you look at all of the different stories, one of the things you want to try to do is gather all the information that you can before you make your decision on what happened and everything. And so I did that. I went through as many newspapers as I can and tried to find out. And apparently at one particular time in one of the articles, it stated that martial law was declared by the state of Tennessee, and the cavalry, which was a member of the Guard, I guess, National Guard, was called in, and they actually had to patrol the city because, like I said, martial law had been declared. Whether or not this is true, I don't know. But one of the things that was interesting also in the newspapers is that the city was trying to not really vocally talk about or print in the newspaper about the whys that the fire started. Why did this fire start? They were more concerned with basically, let's restore Clarksville. Let's rebuild the city. And so they also drew attention from Judge Tyler as far as the fact is that it's almost like they were trying to cover up something.
So after the fire, what was for lack of a better term, the healing process that the city wanted to do?
They had, they reached out to all of the different churches, all of the different preachers, ministers, and they did have meetings. And that's one of the things that they were trying to do is let's talk about this. Let's try to dissolve this volatile situation. Let's not do any more fighting. Let's try to heal.
So, reflecting back and looking back, what did Clarksville learn from all this?
Yes. After the fire of 1878, one of the most important things that was brought into the situation was the building of new construction in Clarksville, especially on Franklin Street, dealing with all of these commercial buildings. How were they going to construct them that would prevent any further fires?
Today, is there any evidence left of the fire?
If you go down on Franklin Street, I have done many tours down on Franklin Street with people, and one of the things I explained to them, I said, look at some of the dates on top of the buildings. It's 1878, and it's part of the construction of that of the buildings themselves. So the fire brought on major new laws involving the construction and fire safeties of the downtown area. And I think that like I said, it was one of the most important things. And the only evidence I know of is to a historian or any passerby or visitor of the city of Clarksville walking down the street, and some of them look up and they say, what does that mean, 1878? And it's an interesting story.
In the future, we'll be able to kind of understand and say, all right, let's not repeat those mistakes again. And that's a great thing about history that I love. You get to look at the past, get to look at the people of the past, and then learn from their victories and then from their defeats. Thank you very much, Randy, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
It's been fantastic. And so any more information that you want to learn about the fire of 1878, you can learn here at your Clarksville-Montgomery County Public Library. Thank you for joining us.